for the last 2 years for the Ravens, it's been modestly successful for the flock. And why do I say modestly successful for the Baltimore Ravens? Well, you did get to playoff berths in the last 2 years. You get in 2019 the top seed in the AFC, but you lose to the Tennessee Titans in a crazy upset. And then in 2020 you get to the second round, but you lose to the Bills in Buffalo, where Lamar Jackson got hurt and the Ravens got blown out after that. So you try to address like pretty much just about everything from the defense to the offensive line, but then the Ravens actually addressed it in a pretty opposite manner. They trade away their best offensive lineman, their tackle in Orlando Brown Jr. They trade him to pretty much the team that you're trying to beat, the cornerstone, the King of Kings, the Kansas City Chiefs, for a first round pick. Probably it was the money they was trying to get, but I digress. They also lost their other two key pieces in linebacker Matthew Judon, edge rusher Yannick Ngakoue in free agency. I mean, sure, you try to counter all those losses with adding a guard, Kevin Zeitler, in the offensive line. They also drafted linebacker Odafe Owehe in the second round. And then in the first round, you get another receiver in Rashad Bateman. But like we've yet to see if any of those additions like really were gonna like, you know, balance out, you know, they were gonna like glue away, you know, those losses in 2021. And we didn't really yet see it due to a variety of reasons, but we'll address those when we get there. So you get new additions to the offensive line, you get a new receiver in Bateman, you get so a few more defensive pieces. So despite all the losses, you know, the Ravens looked set to finally get over the second round hump, get back to the playoffs, and hopefully make the AFC Championship with Lamar Jackson for the first time. But then, it all came crashing down and it hurt inside. Injury mania happened and it died. What you gonna do, brother, when injury mania comes crashing down on the Ravens flock? That's exactly what happened to the Baltimore Ravens in 2021. Injury mania ran wild in Baltimore, and it didn't happen just during the season. It literally happened well before the season started, during the preseason. You know, you had literally the day before the 2021 general NFL season started, when the Ravens were in practice, they lose a lot of players. They lost their entire running back room. They lost Gus Edwards. They lost J.K. Dobbins to ACL tears. They lose the rookie running back Justice Hill to an Achilles tear. And then they lose their corner Marcus Peters to an ACL tear that same practice. They also lost two other defensive players to ACL tears during the preseason. And then it continues on. They lost Rashad Bateman for half of the season with a groin surgery, and he wouldn't be back till midseason. Then they lose during the season Ronnie Stanley to an ankle injury. They lose Deshaun Elliott. They lose Marlon Humphrey. And then the nail in the coffin himself, they lose Lamar Jackson. They lose Lamar Jackson late in the season, and now it's pretty much the death nail for the Baltimore Ravens in December. So even then, you know, by season's end, the Ravens were last year's 49ers in terms of all the injuries. They had the most players on injury reserve, and even if there weren't any injuries, they had some players on COVID-19. So despite of all the injuries, you know, the Ravens tried to stay competitive as much as possible, but, you know, they were still on the losing end of things. You know, looking at it past the injuries, their defense was really bad. The secondary had a hard time locking down on just about everybody. Before he went down with the injury, Marlon Humphrey was a disappointment. Gave up a lot of plays, gave up a lot of touchdowns to opposing receivers. Odafe Uwehe was solid, but, you know, he still remains a work in progress. And then on the offensive side of the ball, yeah, pretty much a rehash of last year, especially coming from the play calling for Lamar Jackson, making him run the damn ball a gajillion times, like as if he was the second coming of RG Nee. Literally. They literally made him run the damn ball because, well, we got no running backs. All we have is Devontae Freeman and Latavius Murray. We don't give a fuck about those two, so let's just give Lamar Jackson like he's 2012 RG3 or Michael Vick. So, pretty much most of the play calling centered around Lamar Jackson running the damn ball, whether it's in the middle, to the left, to the right. That was literally the play calling made by the coaches. I don't understand. I don't understand it. Sure, Lamar Jackson did make a little bit of progress as a passer. He made some nice throws at times, but then obviously he made a lot of turnovers throughout the year. But you still have to let him throw. You still have to make reasons why he's a dual threat quarterback, not just make him run the damn ball to the point where he actually gets hurt in games like he did this year. But damn, it is not a good sign when that happens. But other than that, on a positive note, Mark Andrews, one of the more underrated tight ends this year, probably a top one of the top tight ends this year, aside from Travis Kelce and George Kittle. And he didn't get talked about a lot often because, well, Kelce really the more talked about name, and George Kittle doing more things in San Francisco. But Mark Andrews, clearly the team MVP, always being the open man for Lamar, and even for Tyler Huntley, a reliable go-to option when Marquise Brown, who had a solid season, was getting more targeted by receivers. So Mark Andrews was always the go-to guy. And for Rashad Bateman, we didn't really see much of him. We didn't really see much action from him, so it remains to be seen what he has to offer. So speaking of Tyler Huntley, man, he stepped up big time. They only went 1-3 in the games that he played, but he looked like a more than just a backup quarterback. Sure, he had his down moments, but he was a crazy ass dual threat quarterback. Just look at his game against the Green Bay Packers and I think it was like the LA Rams in those games. Insane. Pretty insane when you think about it. Like we're like are we seeing a Lamar Jackson clone in Baltimore? Holy shit. So, in the grand scheme of things, the Ravens were 8-3 by the end of November. And they were close to taking over the AFC North. Again, named some impressive wins over the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Colts, and the Vikings. But they were having some play calling issues, no shows, and again all the injuries that were just too much to overcome by season's end. That December stretch, they were on a 6-game losing streak, and then they went 8-9. Yeah. So, especially when, John Harbaugh went for 2 late in the games, especially in that game against the Green Bay Packers, because he clearly didn't trust that defense well enough. But again, why did you go for 2 points when okay, you didn't trust your defense enough, but don't go for 2 if you know that Tyler Huntley can't get it done. So, yes, a few games can be blamed on Lamar, but that's just the little snippet of the tape being recorded. John Harbaugh and now former defensive coordinator Don Martindale are just as much to blame for what happened. They made some questionable calls on for the team, and the defense was just booty cheeks throughout the year. And obviously, clearly, injury mania ran wild all over Baltimore in 2021, and there was just a lot of talent deficient all over that team and throughout the year. So overall, a disappointing year for Baltimore. Injury mania did play a role. It ran wild on Baltimore, but they got to improve for 2022, or they're gonna run behind in that division. So they don't have a lot of cap space to spend, around $8 million. Clearly, at the time this is being recorded, we don't know who they re-signed, who's leaving, but they do have some decisions to make. Calais Campbell, Deshaun Elliott, Bradley Bozeman, Jimmy Smith, Justin Houston, all key free agents that they have to decide on keeping or letting them go. They're currently slated to pick 14th in the draft. they have to address pretty much a lot of things, like the offensive line. When they lost they lost Ronnie Stanley for the season, that offensive line went to shit. And then obviously the loss of Orlando Brown Jr. In last offseason. Yeah, that really wasn't addressed. So they have to address the tackle position this offseason to reshore that offensive line to give Lamar Jackson time to throw. And yeah, I guess if you want to let him run the ball too, make him a dual threat quarterback again. But to lessen that effect, you got to get some help behind Mark Andrews, Hollywood Brown, and Rashad Bateman. You got to get some secondary help. Some secondary receiver help, what I mean. That depth behind those three, not enough. Sammy Watkins was a very, very inconsistent mess. And when I mean inconsistent, in a bad way. Did you see that drop touchdown against the Miami Dolphins? Yeah. Wide open, and he dropped it. So they're going to need some reserves that can step in as a third or fourth option behind him. So just, add some like depth pieces behind that receiver room. They got to go attack the secondary. They got to attack the defense because behind Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters, yeah, that defense in 2021 really gave up a lot of big chunk plays and a lot of points to the likes of Cincinnati and Las Vegas. So for new defensive coordinator Mike McDaniel, the front office, they have to invest in the offensive, not the offensive line, the secondary, to get better. They have to get better corners. They have to invest in a quality safety. They have to maximize the potential of this defense, and that starts by investing in the secondary. And then the big elephant in the room, the contract extension for Lamar Jackson. Yes, like they have to wonder if it's worth giving a badass contract to a quarterback posing as a running back. So yes, that is a question that needs to be addressed. But for the Ravens, they have to decide on it really soon. They don't want to beat around the bush for too long because it could lead to Lamar Jackson being unhappy. Then he can just ride out the string of his fifth-year option, and then he can just pull out the franchise tag however many times until he gets like a badass contract eventually, or worse, he actually goes out and plays somewhere else. So the sooner the Ravens sign Jackson to a contract extension, like I don't know how big that's gonna be, the sooner the Ravens can focus attacking this next season and focusing on their team needs. Otherwise, it's going to be a contract year for Lamar Jackson if a deal doesn't get done. So, yes, an 8-9 record seems bad for Baltimore and outsider fans, but they managed to make the most of it, I guess. And I guess it was somewhat of a good evaluation for which players to hold on to next year and beyond. So if the Ravens can avoid injury mania this offseason, if everyone can get healthy, you get Lamar Jackson to an extension, you add some pieces to the offensive line and the secondary, Baltimore can be back with the vengeance in 2022. And especially, considering the Bengals just lost the Super Bowl, and what happened, like considering what happens to Super Bowl losing teams, generally, Baltimore could be right back in the mix of the AFC North and perhaps beyond.